Welcome to Melanin Convos, a sisterhood of mom friends having relatable and unorthodox conversations while holding space for each other and amplifying Black voices. To Melanin Convos. I'm Nikita, and today we're going to be talking about mom rage, parental anger, the feelings of guilt that come with having an infant, and just normalizing feelings around needing support outside of ourselves or our partner, and how we can go about feeling good about this parenting journey. So let's dive into what exactly is mom rage. I know it sounds like odd and bizarre to even associate the two, but it actually is a real thing. And I've experienced it, so I'll be sharing my own experience with mom rage. I would say that mom rage has to do with obviously motherhood and that experience of coming into motherhood and having feelings of rage and anger, or whether it's like a moment, a spontaneous moment of feeling anger, and just like rage uncontrollable that you aren't able to pinpoint like in that moment. So moms or parents feel this rage because of a variety of reasons, whether that's unmet needs around sleep, whether that's your inability to soothe your infant, an unfair distribution of labor. There's just a variety of things that can add fuel to your fire and can contribute to you feeling rage. So there's an account called Mom Well. It is a clinical like account on Instagram. They are therapists, so they can support you on this journey, but they do a lot of work and research on mom rage. It's Canadian as well. I think they have services both in Canada and the States. But she does a lot of research and she talks a lot about what mom rage is, how you can navigate that, and just the mental load of being a mom and parenting. And she dives deeper into that. So I would check her out. And she also has a book. So check that out. But as it pertains to like mom rage and those experiences, let's just dive a little bit deeper into some of the common things that I think people experience when they transition from like not having kids, or even having 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, whatever the case may be, and why they experience it. I think the number one thing is the unfair distribution of labor. So when I first had my son, someone gave me this book called How Not to Hate Your Husband After Having Kids. And it was entertaining, I guess, comedy relief or comedic relief. But the book was also based in Gottman's research. If you're not familiar with who that is, he is literally like the relationship godfather. He does a lot of research on relationship, romantic relationship, friendships. He's like the OG of relationships. So the book was based in a lot of that research, and basically how to have conversations with your spouse about the distribution of labor, who does what, and how you can have an experience with raising children that isn't daunting, and how you can communicate with your husband or your wife about what you are expecting, and how we can navigate through this experience together and essentially not hate your partner during it and after it. And I felt like that book was a great foundation for me to communicate a lot of the things that I needed. So I think when we first had our son, being able to figure out, okay, who does what? Who's gonna do morning routine? Who will do nighttime routine? Who will wash like my breast pump parts and like bottles, like who will do what? Having that type of conversation was essential and really helped me those first few months, just adjusting to the baby, who is gonna wake up with him at night. And it just so happened that for us, I was the one that was waking up because of like, I had to feed him, and just that whole situation around him and being fed. It was difficult because I wasn't lactating at first, and he had to have formula, which led me to feel guilty about the fact that I wasn't able to produce milk for him due to having a C-section. So that was a whole thing. And then so if you've ever had lactation concerns, you'll know that you're advised to exclusively pump and feed for a period of time to one, get your like flow going and your like how much you're producing, and two, getting the baby to get used to like latching to your breast and not getting them familiar with a bottle. So like for a long time my son was just exclusively breastfeeding because we were trying to get him used to it and getting my supply up. And so because of that, he wasn't taking a bottle. So then he wasn't taking a bottle like at all. He refused to take a bottle from anybody. So that was a whole other concern, which also contributed to me feeling overwhelmed and frustrated with the fact that I was the only one being able to feed this child because he would not take a bottle. And we literally bought like every bottle to try and get this kid to take a bottle. I mean, eventually he did, but in that month period of trying, it was overwhelming. It was frustrating. And yeah, like I did feel angry about the fact that I had to be the one to do everything as it pertains to feeding him. So I still had to pump and exclusively breastfeed in that 3 months of his first 3 months of life. And it was overwhelming. And I think having that conversation with somebody about that experience would have been helpful for me. But nonetheless, I was able to express my feelings to my partner. And I think that was the great part of that book, How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids. It was giving me language to have that conversation. One of the, like I mentioned, one of the biggest things is distribution of labor. So when like moms feel like they're not appreciated, that they do all these things and no one is really acknowledging what they do or even helping, that can contribute to mom rage. I will also add that mom rage does not only mean that like dads don't experience this as well. I guess it's just coined mom rage because moms are typically the primary caregiver for children for a variety of reasons. But any parent can feel this. But I think what's important to acknowledge is that when you are feeling like this anger, this rage, is that being able to pinpoint it. And what I mean by that is I'm feeling angry or this bouts of rage because I'm lacking sleep, because I am overwhelmed, because no one is helping me. When I'm able to pinpoint it, that means that there is an ability for me to ask for help, and I'm able to find solutions, right? So there are also instances where rage is a symptom of depression, like period. And you'll know the difference between the two because when we have rage as a symptom of depression, there is no link. Like we cannot say I'm feeling rage because no one is helping me, or I'm feeling rage because my body is overstimulated. When we're feeling rage because of feelings of depression, it's just you aren't able to link it to anything. And I think that's an important distinction because if you are feeling like I cannot pinpoint where this anger, where this rage is coming from, we know that it is essential for us to find help, to reach out to somebody to give us the support that we need. Okay, so before I go into like my story with mom rage, I want to make a point to just acknowledge that I feel like as like a Christian woman, I feel like there isn't a lot of spaces available for us to talk about not enjoying motherhood. I feel like we are supposed to enjoy every season, every moment of motherhood, and there isn't an opportunity to talk about the things that we don't enjoy and that we're not happy with. I think to express those things mean that we're not grateful for the gift and that we sound ungrateful, and that isn't true. I think that two things can be true, and you can obviously love the gift, love that God blessed you with this beautiful child, and still dislike aspects of the process and dislike aspects of motherhood. Those two things can be true, and I want you to feel freed from any other comments or narratives as it pertains to motherhood that may be holding you down and thinking that I can't express or even think out loud these thoughts that I have. That's not true. You can enjoy it and still dread aspects of it. And I think that that needs to be a conversation that we have more openly, like socially, but also when it comes to like Christian communities, having this conversation about the fact that like, yeah, there are things that you're not gonna love about it, and there will be things that are extremely hard, but it doesn't mean that you don't have faith, and it doesn't mean that you are necessarily doing anything wrong, right? And I think that by allowing us to have that conversation, we can normalize people's experiences of past and set up women and men and families for the experience to come. I think like a lot of us, or a lot of our parents, a lot of people don't talk about these things in fear of being, or us, in fear of people thinking that they're bad parents. So I think that like even our parents and generations past may have not enjoyed, and obviously didn't enjoy, aspects of parenting and mothering, but no one said anything because they feared that they would be deemed as a bad parent, or like ill-equipped, or that their kids are in harm's way, and that isn't true, right? Like we can experience multiple things at the same time, and asking for help helps us to navigate through those experiences and those like intense feelings. I know for myself, when we first moved to Edmonton, and I ended up going back to Toronto because I just felt like this is overwhelming. My husband was working 12 hours, and it was just me, and I was with my son by myself for like 12 hours. Like, no, this is just too much. So I decided to go back home to Toronto, be with my parents and my sister. So at least I was with other people during the day, and I had hands, I had help. But I could remember like one day I was home, no one was home with me, everyone was at work, and my son wouldn't go down for the nap. And this is just like, this is infamous, my child not going down for naps. And it was something that was very stressful for me, like him not going down, not knowing why he isn't going down, and him just always wanting to sleep on me, which in hindsight, I now know that like infants just want to be close to their parents. And I now know that there was nothing wrong with him wanting to sleep with me or like near me, all the things. Like, yeah, I acknowledge that now. But at the time, I was like, what am I doing wrong? Why won't this child like go down for this nap? And I spent a lot of the time like rocking him, and I'd be like very strategic about making sure the blinds were closed and that it was like really dark, and like rocking him to sleep. And he just wouldn't go down. Like I think 30 minutes of rocking him, he wouldn't go to sleep. And I remember like being in my old room, like my childhood room, doing this, and I was on the ground like trying to rock him, whatever. And yeah, I remember like just like literally screaming in frustration at the fact that this child would not go to sleep. And I was just over it. I was over being by myself. I was over like him not going to sleep. He's 8 months at this time, and it's like, why aren't you going to sleep? We've already tried sleep training twice prior to this day, and it's like it wasn't working. And it's like, what am I doing wrong? Like, does this kid hate me? Why isn't he doing the things that I know that he needs? I know he's tired. Why won't he go to sleep? And yeah, like I really had like an outburst of like anger, like literally just screaming. And then I put him down and I walked away because I can't deal. Like this is just too much. Obviously he was in his playpen, but I just had to put him down. Like I can't do this anymore. And I walked away from him. He was crying and I was crying, but not with him. And like, this is a lot. Like I feel inadequate. I feel like this child is just not doing what I feel like he should be doing. And then of course, watching people have such an easy time with those first few months of motherhood and infancy, it's just like, okay, why isn't this working out for me? What am I doing wrong? And of course, it was COVID. So it wasn't like I can ask people to come and help me. And obviously people didn't feel like they could too, because they didn't want to get me sick. They didn't want to get our son sick. So it was really difficult to be the only caregiver at that time. And I really had to like regulate myself before I could go back and deal with him, because it was just so overwhelming. And looking back at it, like years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I definitely had a moment of rage with my son. And yeah, like I I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to reach out to. And I just left it. And I would say that that wasn't my first experience. And it was my first experience, but it wasn't my last experience dealing with rage with my son. I know when I came back, when I actually like settled in Edmonton a few months after, again, we had a similar experience. And yeah, I was just over it and I was sad and I wasn't enjoying motherhood. It wasn't looking like what I thought it would look like. And I felt, of course, guilty about that. I felt guilty about not being able to have the support that I needed. And I guess for me, anyways, moving from my hometown somewhere else, realizing that I needed a lot more support than I estimated. And not being able to access support was a really big deal for me. And it just piled on the layers of like guilt and like anger. And it wasn't even so much that I didn't have like help. My spouse, like completely hands-on, like the distribution of labor was there. It was just like me feeling like I can't get this child to sleep. Therefore, my sleep is being impacted and I can't function. I'm not able to function. And so I remember like this is maybe 2 years later, 2 years after having my son, my friend is pregnant and she's like, oh, you need to read this book called A Mom is Born. And I was like, oh, okay, it's a postpartum book. The whole premise of the book is navigating postpartum, being able to recognize postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. That is the whole premise of the book. And I was like, well, my son's turning 3. Like, I think I'm really past postpartum era. So like, I don't know how useful this book is gonna be for me, but I was definitely wrong. The book was incredibly helpful. And I feel like reading that book and just being able to use a lot of the action items in the book helped me to be able to process what I was experiencing like 2 years prior. And I work in mental health. Like I know the symptoms of like anxiety and like depression. However, I wasn't able to pinpoint that perhaps I was experiencing postpartum depression. And yeah, I just wasn't able to acknowledge that or even note it. And I don't think, obviously, because we weren't with like our family, we weren't with our core group of people, people weren't also able to notice it either. And we were in isolation, it's COVID, so no one was able to even note that, oh, there's something off about Nikita. And I think not being able to have like access to people and people see me allowed it to prolong longer than it needed to be. But I'm grateful that I was able to look back and be like, yeah, that is definitely what I was experiencing. And here's how I can move forward. And I think from that book, being able to create a postpartum plan. So she calls it a postpartum pack. So this is where you get people to check in with you and to help you on this journey. For myself, because I was so far out postpartum, I called it like a mental health group or whatever. So I asked people to check in on me on particular things, particular items. And it was so helpful 2 years later because I was able to be reflective. I was able to ask for the support that I needed. And although I wasn't experiencing that rage in the moment, I knew that there were still aspects of this motherhood experience that I needed support with, that I needed help with, and that I needed to be able to talk through with people, right? And I think another thing that I probably should have continued doing that I didn't do, but I'm doing now is continuing with like therapy. When I first had my son, I continued my sessions with my therapist, but I stopped them because I just felt like I have to bring my son to the sessions. He was supposed to be sleeping during those sessions, but he wouldn't sleep. So I ended up having to bring him to the sessions, and it was just overwhelming for him to be there. It was overwhelming for me to have to care for him and still think about what I'm saying and how I'm going to articulate my feelings to my therapist. And I just ended the sessions maybe 3 months in. And I can say now that that's probably something I shouldn't have done because I needed someone to have eyes on me when we were in isolation, right? And I think if I had continued those sessions, my therapist would have been able to notice some of my patterns that were out of whack. And she would have been able to either help me process through that or prescribe me with medication to help level out my hormones and level out whatever chemical imbalance I was experiencing at the time. And I think that for a lot of us, when we're in like the trenches of like motherhood in those first few months, we don't feel like we can ask, we don't feel like we can reach out, or just the thought of doing that is overwhelming. And I think that if we can have at least one person that we can say, can you help me? Or can you be aware of my patterns and when things are changing so that I can reach out for support, can make a world of a difference and can be what saves your life essentially, and helps you to be able to show up as the best person and the best mom for yourself and your family and your kids, right? So being able to do that definitely would have been, I think my life and my experience would have been different. And I do hope that that will be something that would be different for any other mom watching this podcast right now, that you'll be able to say to one person, can you just notice my patterns? Or can you just help me find someone, a therapist, somebody, a mom group, something to help me as I process through these really big feelings that sometimes I'm not able to even name or label because I'm going through so much of the motions of feeding and cleaning and prepping and bathing and watching and just all the things that when it comes to having an infant. Having someone to be your partner in that, whether that is like your spouse or just another friend, I think that can help move the needle on whether or not you experience rage or not. I also don't want to demonize that experience of rage. If you do experience it, like, it's all good. Like, these are human experiences. You are having a human experience, and there's nothing wrong with you experiencing that, you feeling that. I think what's most important is being able to process through that and getting the support that you need. I don't know how, like, I can't stress enough that getting the support that you need, whether it's like running a meal train, having a therapist, having friends come see you, whatever it is, just getting the support that you need for your health and the health of your child and the health of your family is of most importance. So my takeaway for us today is, if you are experiencing mom rage right now, or if you have experienced it in the past, being able to pinpoint the source of that. So think back about what was happening, who were you interacting with, what is the cause of that rage. Being able to pinpoint that, like I mentioned, will help you to be able to plan for your next steps, right? So what is it that I was experiencing or going through, why I'm having this rage or this feelings of anger? Pinpoint that, and then being able to have a next step. So a next step could be asking a friend for help, attending like a mom group, reaching out to a therapist, your doctor. So often, like when we go for our checkups, they don't ask us about depression or our feelings. A lot of the information that's being shared and that we are given is pertaining to the baby. But I want to encourage you that when you go for those checkups, to push past what is happening with the doctor and actually tell the doctor what you are feeling. So if you feel like you are feeling more angry and more upset or more overwhelmed, say those things very plainly. If you have to like write it out in your phone and like read it when you go to that appointment, do it. I know those appointments are quick and they try to get you in and out, but try to have a list of the things that you are feeling and experiencing that has to do with you, and let your doctor know that you are experiencing these things. So that would be a next step. If you are not able to pinpoint that as you are reflecting, then we need to get professional support, whether that is, again, reaching out to a therapist or letting your doctor know that I'm feeling these feelings and I'm not able to pinpoint it. What do I do next? I think another takeaway can be, what have I been told about anger and rage, and how is what I've been told being displayed in how I experience motherhood. For a lot of us, we've been told that anger, rage, sadness are bad feelings. Those emotions are bad. We shouldn't feel them. If we are feeling them, we need to switch out those feelings very quickly. We don't sit with our emotions. We don't sit with those feelings. So what have I been taught about those things, and how am I displaying what I've been taught in real life, right? So for myself, being taught that, again, those emotions are bad. So I didn't even give myself the opportunity to really sit with those emotions. I just decided I need to move on with the next thing and the next thing, and not actually sitting with them or even expressing that I am angry about my son not sleeping. That's actually making me really mad, and I'm feeling enraged because of it. So I think actually sitting with those feelings, processing, like sifting them through, and really thinking about what it is that you are feeling and why you're feeling that way, and how you can, in real time, deal with that anger and express those feelings to somebody else. So it was a lot of takeaways. One, pinpointing what the rage is, and what have we been taught about rage and anger, and how are we displaying that in real time when we are feeling those feelings. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening and watching this episode of Melanin Convos. Melanin Convos is directed and produced by Nikita Buckner, editing, audio, and video production by Tamwa Ladajo. If you'd like to support Melanin Convos, share this episode with a friend or visit our website in the show notes. We are amplifying Black voices and creating a sisterhood of